Joining me now is General Jack Keane, our mentor. He is retired four-star general, Fox News senior strategic analyst. As I said, my mentor on all these things. General Keane, what do you make it? The Russians have apparently breached the city limits, but there's fierce fighting going on. How do you see this military situation, General Keane?
Well, I think, first of all, the Ukrainians have exceeded all expectations here. You know, the Russians, as we said once before, they have selected the most complicated, high-risk campaign plan out of all the options that were available to them. And that means conducting an assault on 4 different axes of advance, all requiring close air support, all requiring integrated logistics on those 4 axes. And Larry, they are struggling. This is the 3rd night of their air campaign, and their air campaign has not reached the degree of effectiveness that we expected. The Ukraine Air Force is still out there, and a lot of their infrastructure is still out there, and they're still doing damage. So they have not shut down Ukraine air power. The second thing is this air campaign has not been effective in eroding the Ukraine defense systems so that the Russian offensive troops can make progress. They are struggling. They came across the Belarus border and immediately got into a major confrontation at Chernobyl with the Ukraine Defense Forces. And they've been struggling all along. Yes, they are closing in on the city of Kyiv much later than expected. They have not taken Kharkiv yet, which is another major city to the southeast of Kyiv. They have not taken Odessa, which should have been taken by now. And even in the Donbass region, things are not going according to what most people thought, is they would roll up the Ukraine military that's there, and that has not happened. They have moved out of Crimea. They did an amphibious landing, and they have moved into Mariupol, and so they have made advances there. But overall, they are behind in terms of what their objectives are. And this airfield that is so close to Kyiv that we mentioned, that is a strategic platform. You know they wanted to seize that on the first day because it's crucial for there to bring in their follow-on forces and follow-on capability for the final takedown of the capital city. And they've struggled to also accomplish that.
Have they?
I think, you know, Go ahead, Larry.
No, sir. I was just going to ask what the position is with the airport. Have the Russians taken the airport, or is it still up for grabs?
Well, they have finally taken it, I understand, but it exchanged hands once they did take it. So there's likely some support functions being provided at that airport now for the ground attack onto Kyiv. The other thing is, I thought for certain that we would see some fairly aggressive and persistent cyber. But whatever city our guys are reporting from, the lights are on, the power is working, water is operating, and I thought those were the 2 things they would go after. And while some of the banks are out of cash, financial transactions are taking place. So the cyber warfare as an instrument of their military capability has not done anything near also what was expected. I think this is a tell in terms of the challenges that Putin has going forward. You know, he's going to eventually work out he's either going to negotiate a surrender with Zelensky, which I don't think Zelensky will do, or he will force the change of the transition of power. And once that happens, he's facing the same problem that he was facing, Larry, in 2014 when Yanukovych was in power. A Russian stooge, Ukrainian, pro-Russian, and the people threw him out. They were absolutely fundamentally opposed to him. These are some of the headwinds I think that Putin is facing, not just from the unexpected toughness of the Ukrainian military, but by and large the steadfastness and determination of the Ukrainian people. And their determination to resolve is much greater now than what it was 8 years ago because of the exposure to the Russian repression these last 8 years. So I think Putin has some headwinds in front of him, for sure.
So on that point, it's a key point. Has the U.S. and NATO supplied Ukrainian with more weapons that makes them stronger? And I'm particularly interested in anti-air kinds of, Stinger missiles and so forth. I mean, Russian air power, I assume, is very, very lethal. Are the Ukrainians in better shape to protect against that or to fight against that?
Well, we did provide them some air defense capability. We never did provide them all of the air defense capability they wanted, which would have been able to protect against missiles, cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. We never did much with that, but we did provide them with some Stinger missiles that came out of the Baltics, and I'm certain that has been helpful. But the promise of more weapons from the United States and also from the NATO Secretary General is out there. The problem we have right now is Russia controls the airspace. So how we get those weapons to them is another matter. We have ways to do it. I'm not going to talk about them all on this open television station, but there are ways that we can get those weapons to them. It's just a matter of our will to want to do it. And certainly they want as much capability as we can possibly put in their hands going forward.
Is this talk, General Keane, talk that Putin would negotiate with Zelensky or Russia would engage in diplomacy with the Zelensky government? Is that just baloney and propaganda, or might it actually reflect the disappointments that you're describing, the early Russian disappointments, that things ain't so easy as they originally hoped?
Well, it could be that. I think it's just a way to try to deal with this without having to take this leadership down. In other words, if he can negotiate a ceasefire and negotiate a surrender, that'll be a lot easier for the Russians to have to deal with this in terms of the international community that's looking at them every single day than forcibly having to capture or kill the leaders of this government. I think Zelensky will reject that, and he will stay with his people and fight on. That's the reality of what we're dealing with here.
So Zelensky, I mean, there's always talk about the kill list. Russia has a kill list. Zelensky's on the kill list, et cetera, et cetera. But as you're reporting, and I've heard this elsewhere, Zelensky is staying, not running. Zelensky is a pretty tough customer, I think. So that's going to be a problem for Putin. Putin doesn't like tough customers. He doesn't like principled people. It means this fight could go on for a very long time, does it not?
It's going to go on longer than Putin certainly thought it was going to go on. And even, look at, once there is a transition and we have the stooge in charge, Putin says he's not going to occupy the country. Well, how do you think you're going to be able to keep that Russian stooge in charge of that country if you don't have the forces there to guarantee that? So obviously there's going to be an occupation. They'll switch the forces from a lot of these combat forces that are there now to consolidate and take key terrain and move in other forces that would be more conducive to the occupation. But believe me, the Ukrainian people are going to push back on all of that. And I believe, as I said before, I think Putin is overreached here, and this is going to be an indicator of it. I think also NATO is reacting positively. I think NATO's got a long way to go to show some leg here in terms of their budgets and capabilities. But they are putting forces into the former Soviet republics that are the most vulnerable, like the Baltics and Poland. They are moving in the right direction. Long way to go, I think, in terms of where they need to have their defense budgets. And we have to really recognize what's happening here, Larry. I mean, Putin is changing the balance of power in Europe and driving up the risk quite considerably by threatening the former Soviet republics that are now under NATO. Iran is about to get a windfall of sanctions from the revised JCPOA deal, which will encourage their malign behavior in the Middle East.
Insanity. China
is looking at this. And you know they're cheering from the sidelines. And we're outgunned and outmanned in the Indo-Pacific. We have to look hard at our defense budget needs. During the Cold War, Larry, 7% of GDP during the Cold War was the norm for a defense budget. When the Soviet Union collapsed, that went south under 3%. And that's where it is today.
Yep.
We can't meet the demands of these threats at that level of funding. It is that simple. The domestic increase, Larry, in this country in this recent budget is 16%. The defense budget increase in this recent budget is 2%. That doesn't even account for inflation. So we're going down, not up.
I was with Reagan when he put it over 7%. We got to stop their war finance. I'm telling you, General, in addition to drill, which would bring oil prices down, we've got to sanction the Russian central bank. That's where the payments have to run through. We sanction the rest. The SWIFT system is all very interesting, but the central bank, all payments run through the central bank. If we put a sanction on that, just the U.S. in dollar terms, that would stop cash from going into Russia. It would be a killer. It would end Putin's war finance. That's why I advocated it in my opening statement. But, General, I want to ask you, I just have you for a little bit more. A very distinguished national security advisor, someone that you know and respect, said to me this morning, after Putin takes over the Ukraine, he's going to go after Lithuania. Do you have a quick thought about that point, going after Lithuania?
The Baltics are the most vulnerable countries because of their proximity to Russia. They're small countries, not particularly well defended with their own militaries. And of the three of them, the one that is the most vulnerable is Lithuania. And that's because of Kaliningrad, that's right next door, a piece of Russian territory that sits there, and it's like an armed camp. It has very sophisticated advanced weapons. And that would be the place to start for sure. I've played war games dealing with the Russians taking the Baltics. The threat is real, Larry. They can roll this thing up very quickly, and we are challenged to get there, particularly when we're an ocean away, because they would take down our rival airfields, they would take down our rival ports. It is a challenge. That's why we have to have as much clarity on what it's going to take in terms of defending NATO adequately, as you are suggesting, in the clarity of thought you're presenting here, and shutting down Putin financially. We need that also on the defense side with that kind of clarity of thought.
I would think we'd like to see the NATO, including the United States, say, we, NATO, will defend Lithuania. I need to hear that. I need to hear that.
Well, we will. And they should be saying it.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
All right. General Keane, thank you, sir. As always, your clarity is much, much helpful. We are grateful for it.